Hello and welcome to tonight's Live from Paris with me, Belle Donati. It's 8 p.m. here in the French capital. The headlines. Polls close in Catalonia after a regional election that's seen a huge turnout in a vote that's been billed by separatist parties as a de facto referendum on independence. The UN votes overwhelmingly against the US's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, despite threats from Trump to cut off financial aid to countries that voted against it. And 1 million people have now contracted cholera in Yemen. New figures from the Red Cross highlight the plight of a nation already struck by war and famine. Also coming up on the programme, Apple admits to purposely slowing down older iPhones, but it says it's got a good reason. That's coming up in our business update. And a series of unsolved crimes in the French Alps have been reopened. Could a serial killer who's currently under investigation be behind the cold cases? We'll have the latest on that investigation. Our top story tonight, the polls have just closed in a crucial election for the Spanish region of Catalonia. Millions of Catalans turned out to cast their ballot in a vote that pits separatist leaders against parties that want to remain part of Spain. Just 2 months after a failed secession bid, the region is still in turmoil. One of the candidates campaigned from jail and another from self-imposed exile in Belgium. Well, our correspondents have been following this story from Barcelona and Madrid. Let's take you first to Catherine Norris-Trent, who's at the headquarters of the largest pro-independence party in Barcelona. Catherine, what's the mood like there? Is there confidence or are they bracing for the hung vote that's expected?
Well, here, people are really waiting for any details to emerge. They're feeling slightly nervous. Everyone's on tenterhooks, waiting to see what results come out. They're crossing their fingers. They're going to have a good night for the pro-independence party. In fact, they're hoping to come out on top and be the largest pro-independence party. But that's far from guaranteed. Opinion polls going into this race pointed to a very tight race indeed, with the polls changing in the last few days. And we know there were a great number of undecided voters who perhaps wouldn't change sides between independence or union with Spain, but might switch between the different parties in those camps. So it's far from a done deal here. There are big preparations underway for a party here, but so far the crowds are waiting to see what's happened. We know a lot of people have been last-minute voting as well, turning out after work to try and have their say. So we're waiting to see the first exit polls, the first signs from the voting centres to see what's going on now. We've got the first estimations coming in now, and it looks like a very tight race between the Esquerra Republicana, here the Republican left pro-independence party, and the Ciudadanos centre-right Citizens Party. According to exit polls from Spanish media, those are not confirmed results yet, but if that's the case, there could be a great deal of horse trading to come in political negotiations about forming a coalition government. That could take a lot of time and could be quite complicated.
And of course, Catherine, you've been touring those polling stations all day. Has the turnout been as massive as was expected?
Well, we're still waiting for the precise latest turnout figures to come in, but there were a lot of people throughout the day. At the opening of polling stations, people queuing up outside hundreds of metres along the road where we were in central Barcelona, and they flooded in once those doors were finally opened. We saw long lines throughout the day, especially at lunchtime and after work as people finished here in the evening. We know that the turnout was up on the last regional elections in 2015, up by at least 5% at 6 p.m. So yes, this is going to be, it's looking like record turnout. And people I spoke to, that really fitted in with what people were telling me from all sides of the political spectrum. Pro-independence voters really fired up, really saying this was their chance to answer back to the government in Spain, which imposed direct rule on Catalonia and sacked the regional government. Well, this was their chance to fight back at the ballot box. And on the other side, we had pro-unionist voters, those who want Catalonia to stay a part of Spain, saying they were the silent majority and they wanted to make that known, that the independence camp had been getting a lot of attention, but that they feel there's no majority for independence in Catalonia. So both sides really fired up, but both of them wanting to put an end to the political crisis that has been rocking their region too.
Catherine, thank you, and we'll be coming back to Catherine Norris-Trent throughout the evening with our coverage of the Catalonia vote. At the top of the hour, we'll have a special hour of programming live from Barcelona. Our European Affairs editor, Kat Nicholson, will be at the helm. Well, let's go live to her now. She joins us live from Barcelona. Kat, we'll be coming to you live at the top of the hour for that special from Barcelona. Tell us what we've got to look forward to.
Well, we're going to hopefully have a lot more results for you. They're going to be confirmed, of course, in the hours to come. We know that polls have just closed, as Catherine Norris-Trent was telling you. We're going to be getting those firm turnout figures, which we know will be quite a crucial indicator of which way the vote might have gone. We won't actually get any full results for several days, but we will have partial results of around 80% of the vote counted by 10 p.m. Barcelona time. That's the same as Paris time, of course. So in the meantime, as we get all the indications coming through to us, I'm going to have a series of very special guests for you. We've really reached out all across the political spectrum here in Catalonia. We've got members of the very firmly pro-independence, anti-independence parties. Also those who say they quite like a referendum, but not actual full independence. Really a little bit of everything. And we're going to be looking into how this process works as well. It is a little complex. We're going to hopefully be lifting the lid on that for you, and looking at some of the key figures. Carles Puigdemont, for example, in exile in Brussels, taking a bit of a closer look at these main characters in this end-of-year play that's playing out here in Catalonia.
Well, we're looking forward to it already. And if, Kat, as expected, we end up with no absolute majority tonight, what can we expect next? It's not exactly going to be a relaxing Christmas for Catalonia's politicians, is it?
You can say that again. In fact, the official government count is due to start on December the 24th, which is when Spaniards celebrate Christmas. So very much ruining the Christmas holiday for some people. The actual work of trying to form a coalition would begin in January. Now, if, as indications seem to be pointing, there is no firm majority for any one faction, then we're going to be looking at some potentially rather thorny coalition building. We're also going to be looking at how Catalonia recovers from this process. This is a place that has been rather split by the last few weeks. We've seen anger on the streets. We've seen violence at some points. We've seen people questioning their identity. Opinion polls have come out asking people, do you feel more Spanish, more Catalan? Those figures have been changing quite drastically over the last few weeks. So really, how is this society going to try and get itself back together? There's also questions for business as well looking ahead. We know that business hates uncertainty. Ever since that independence referendum on October the 1st, dozens of companies have moved their headquarters out of Catalonia just on the off chance that this region might leave Spain, which would mean it was ejected from the European Union. You can imagine the ramifications of that. So, yeah, there's political, societal, business strings to this story. All of that, of course, will be becoming clearer once we start getting those firm results.
Kat Nicholson in Barcelona, and we'll, of course, be coming back to Kat at the top of the next hour for her hour's live coverage. That's our European Affairs correspondent there. Well, today's vote in Catalonia is a litmus test for the independence issue, which has been shaking Spanish politics for more than 2 months now, since an illegal referendum called by former Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont. Laurent Berstecker reports now on how far the shockwaves from tonight's result could spread.
All eyes are on Catalonia, but the stakes are higher than simply forming a new government or knowing how many pro-independence MPs will sit in parliament. The vote is likely to have far-reaching consequences for the future of Spain and its leaders. For the separatist camp, it's almost like a new referendum on independence, the results of which Madrid will this time have to recognize.
Police intervened with a lot of aggression. They didn't let us vote. It was a very sad day. But now the people want to vote and decide for themselves.
For Mariano Rajoy, The vote is a chance to consolidate central power and to reassert his legitimacy as prime minister. Madrid also hopes a separatist defeat could deal a near-fatal blow to their dreams of independence.
In a few days, we will have a magnificent opportunity to recover normalcy, tranquility, conviviality, which is what people truly want.
The results could also affect the Spanish economy. Catalonia is the country's richest region, but since the October 1st referendum, political uncertainty has scared off investors and paralyzed reforms.
The
biggest problem is that this uncertainty is preventing the implementations of reforms which could help boost growth in Catalonia and potentially in the rest of Spain.
The vote's repercussions could even be felt beyond Spain. A victory for the secessionists would encourage other independence movements in Europe and elsewhere to follow suit.
Well, let's take you back over to Barcelona now, and we're going to bring in Martí Anglada. He's a candidate running on the Junts per Catalunya ticket. That's a political platform that's centred around the former regional president Carles Puigdemont, who's currently in exile in Belgium, and it is, of course, firmly pro-independence. He joins us live from our studio in Barcelona. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Anglada. Now, the result tonight is expected to be a very tight one. It's between, obviously, the pro and the independence candidates. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I feel that if the opinion polls made last week are right, which is to see this night, if they are right, we will have a hung parliament probably, and with a very extremely difficult to form an overall majority in the parliament. That will be really difficult to do it, but not impossible anyway. And but this is only in the case that the opinion polls are right, and this is to see. You see, opinion polls are not allowed 5 days before the election. It means that we don't have opinion polls since last Saturday, I think, and therefore things are changing. It looks like participation is very high, extremely high, over 80% is more or less the same rate of voting that was in Scotland in the Scottish referendum. It was about 80%. This is extremely high in European terms, extremely. And with this kind of amounts of voters, it's very difficult to establish, with no precedents, it's very difficult to establish predictable opinion polls. We will have to wait and see which kind of hung parliament we have, or, if opinions are wrong, which majority we have in the parliament.
Despite the understandable reluctance to trust opinion polls at the moment, let's go with it for a second and imagine that there is not an outright majority, not an absolute majority that's required. What kind of coalitions are you willing to make?
If there is no an overall majority, if there is one of the pro-independence parties, which was the case in the last legislature, if there is an overall majority of independent parties, we will have an independent government, and pro-independence government. And this is something easy to imagine. The problem is if the independence parties, which are three, they don't reach the overall majority. In this case, you can imagine a minority government, a pro-independence minority government, with the abstention of the far left. And in this case, we will have a short-lived government. We will take place only to mark the victory over Mr. Rajoy's 155 article of the Spanish Constitution. And after that, they will call probably for new fresh elections before the summer.
What about one of the parties, for instance, Oriol Junqueras' party, the ERC, or perhaps the anti-austerity Catalonia en Comú? Would you be willing to forge coalitions and agreements with them, and perhaps to go on the other side if there was much more of a split vote?
Of course, a coalition. I am a candidate of Junts per Catalunya, which is the list, the president list. But of course, we will be willing to form coalitions with Esquerra Republicana, and if numbers are okay, we can form an overall majority pro-independence with a far left coup. If not, then we will try to reach an abstention position from the Communes, from the New Left, from the same far left group, and in order to get a minority government to call for new elections. This is one way. But I repeat, this is only in the case that opinion polls are right. And if they are not, you can have this night an overall majority of pro-independence parties.
Martí Anglada, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Martí Anglada, they're in Barcelona. He is running on a pro-independence ticket in Catalonia's all-important vote that has just finished. The UN has voted by 128 members to 9 to condemn the US's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. 35 countries abstained, possibly cowed by threats from the US president to cut off financial aid to countries that voted against it. Well, Yemen and Turkey put forward the motion on behalf of Arab and Muslim countries. Yemen's UN representative made the group's position clear.
The decision taken by the United States administration on the 6th of December 2017 on the status of Jerusalem is considered null and void and has no legal consequence that would change the status of occupied Jerusalem. It is considered a blatant violation of the rights of the Palestinian people and the Arab nation and all Muslims and Christians.
Well, the US ambassador to the UN says today's resolution is damaging the UN's reputation.
To its shame, the United Nations has long been a hostile place for the state of Israel. Both the current and the previous Secretary Generals have objected to the UN's disproportionate focus on Israel. It's a wrong that undermines the credibility of this institution, and that in turn is harmful for the entire world.
You heard there from the US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. The cholera outbreak in Yemen has reached a terrible milestone, 1 million cases. This outbreak adds to the suffering of a people already facing war and hunger. Ivana Scatola looks at how the disease has spread so quickly.
It's one of the fastest growing outbreaks of cholera in modern history. Now, the number of people in Yemen infected with the deadly disease has reached 1 million. The outbreak only began in April, meaning 1 in 28 Yemenis is suspected of having contracted the disease at some point in the last 8 months. Most victims are women and children. The country's nearly 3-year conflict between a Saudi-led coalition and Iran-backed Houthi rebels has left 80% of the population without access to clean water, food and healthcare, in part due to the Saudi-led coalition's blockade, which has restricted aid reaching civilians. The UN has said the restrictions could trigger the largest famine the world has seen for decades. Although cholera's death rate is only 0.3%, the size of Yemen's outbreak and the lack of healthcare resources to deal with the crisis puts thousands more at risk. More than 2,200 deaths are associated with the disease so far. The World Health Organization has warned that there could be a new wave of cases at the beginning of the rainy season in March, if the blockade is not lifted by then.
A number of unsolved mysteries in France's Alps region are being opened again. This after a suspected serial killer was placed under formal investigation in a second case on Wednesday. Already charged with kidnapping a young girl, police believe he's also responsible for the murder of a 23-year-old soldier. Rochelle Harrison-Pless has the story.
The case has gripped France. 9-year-old Maëlys went missing from a wedding party in the French Alps last August. Her fate remains unknown, but the number one suspect is 34-year-old Nordal Lelandais. He was placed under formal investigation for her kidnapping. Lelandais is now also under investigation over the murder of Arthur Noyer. The 23-year-old soldier went missing last April, and his skull was recently found on a hiking trail near Chambéry. Several clues led investigators to Lelandais.
Both mobile telephones being used by Nordal Lelandais were geolocated in the exact same area as Arthur Noyer's phone between 11:48 p.m. and 3:41 a.m. An examination of Lelandais' phone showed that on April 25, 2017, an internet search was done using the keywords decomposition of a human body.
Investigators are now re-examining about a dozen other disappearance cases in the region to see whether there is a link with Le Landais. In 2011, 23-year-old Jean-Christophe Morin disappeared at a music festival in Plancherines, just 80 kilometres from Le Landais' house.
We're going to focus again on Jean-Christophe's case, and we'll ask the question, was Mr. Le Landais in the area at that time?
The following year, at the same music festival, a second man, 45-year-old Ahmed Hamadou, also went missing. French investigators now believe Nordal Le Landais could be connected with the brutal killing of a British family and French cyclist near Lake Annecy in 2012, an unsolved mystery that continues to baffle investigators.
Michelle Harrison-Pless with that report. A correspondent from our sister channel, the radio station RFI, has been acquitted in Cameroon after an initial 10-year jail sentence. Ahmed Abba was accused of laundering the proceeds of terrorist acts, but was acquitted by a military tribunal following an appeal. He's still due to serve 2 years behind bars for a lesser charge of failing to denounce acts of terrorism, although Abba has already served 29 months in prison. He denies all charges. It's time now for business. Brian Quinn joins me in the studio. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Belle.
And we're starting with our main story of the day, the vote in Catalonia, of course. A lot on the economic repercussions of that vote.
Well, 2 months of political crisis have already taken a toll on the Catalan economy, with many banks and businesses compelled to relocate their official headquarters, and even a boycott on Catalan goods called by unionist Spaniards. Emerald Maxwell takes a look at the cost so far in this report.
While politicians fight over Catalonia's future, its economy has suffered. The region's growth forecast for 2018 has been cut from 2.8% to 2.1%. That translates to less job creation in an area where over a third of young people are already unemployed.
Every growth point dropped means around 40 to 45,000 fewer jobs created as a consequence of this uncertainty.
Local businesses have also been caught up in the political wranglings. A recent survey showed 25% of Spaniards had begun boycotting Catalan products.
The small artisanal and family-owned businesses like ours, we've really been affected. It practically means ruin for small Catalan businesses.
Anxious they may not be covered under EU laws should Catalonia secede, over 3,000 companies like infrastructure conglomerate Abertis and energy company Gas Natural have moved their headquarters outside the disputed region. Tourism has also taken a hit. For the first quarter of 2018, hotel bookings in Barcelona are down 10% compared to last year.
I think that Catalonia is one thing and Barcelona is another. In Barcelona, it is a temporary issue. We are facing a bad season now, yes, for sure. But whoever wins the election, Barcelona is still a very attractive city.
Whichever way the vote goes, Catalonia's economy faces an increasingly uncertain future.
The European markets largely taking the vote today in stride as investors focus on the final legislative approval of a massive tax overhaul in the U.S. Wednesday night. London's FTSE 100 closing up over 1%, Frankfurt DAX up 0.3%, CAC 40 here in Paris closing up around 0.6%, even Madrid's IBEX index closing up nearly a full percent. Wall Street on the rise after a lackluster Wednesday session as companies like AT&T and Boeing say they'll spend some of their savings from those corporate tax cuts on higher wages and new capital investments. The Dow and the S&P 500 up in the neighborhood of around 0.4%. They're on track for their fifth straight week of gains. NASDAQ Composite up around 0.3%. Well, finally, for business, conspiracy-minded consumers have long suspected Apple of using software updates to purposely slow down older phones to nudge users to upgrade. Well, now the company has admitted it does indeed slow down your iPhone as it ages, but only due to diminishing battery performance. As the lithium-ion batteries in mobile phones rack up charge cycles, they become less able to keep up with peak processor demand. That leads to some phones suddenly shutting down during heavy lifting by the processor. Apple says the slowdown is intended to increase the life of your phone, not decrease it, and that there is a simple solution that doesn't require a new iPhone. Just get the battery replaced, which Apple will do for you for the low price of $79 in the States, which I would say is only a little less than what my whole phone costs. So enjoy their fancy phones.
There we go. Not an iPhone user, Brian Quinn there. Oof. We're crossing over the desk from business to sports with Simon Harding. And Simon, with Christmas around the corner, the Winter Olympics are also around the corner.
Absolutely, Belle. And the excitement is growing as the Winter Olympics are fast approaching. Just 50 days left before the competition gets underway in Pyeongchang. And meanwhile, the Olympic torch continues its travels across the South Korean peninsula. Today, it was in the town of Cheongju in the middle of the country. A ceremony took place in front of the famous Tapyeongri Buddhist temple, a 7-story holy site, the biggest in the country. The torch will go through the capital Seoul this weekend before continuing its road towards the Olympic grounds at Pyeongchang, just in time for the opening ceremony on February 9th. It's the winter break in the French Ligue 1 as all the players are on holiday. But after his record-breaking transfer from Barcelona, all the attention was on Brazilian superstar Neymar, who reflected on his move to Paris Saint-Germain. The Parisians finished top at the winter break with 50 points, 9 points ahead of Monaco and Lyon tied in second. But it has been a particularly fruitful start for Neymar at the French capital, scoring 17 goals and providing 12 assists in all competitions since his move from the Catalan Giants. And 5 months after his arrival, it was plain to see that the Brazilian had adapted very well to the French league and to life in Paris. Take a listen to his reaction.
The adaptation to the French league was quick, I think, because the European style is very similar everywhere. So there's not much difference between the leagues. I think the Brazilian players in Paris helped me a lot here. All the guys from our team, the Spaniards, they've all helped me in the adaptation, and it's getting easier for me.
And all eyes are on the snap elections in Catalonia. Sport has also had a hand in the vote for the Spanish region, with Barcelona's superstar Gerard Piqué voting in the elections. The Barcelona defender was seen taking part in the ballot and has in the past been very outspoken about the Catalan people being able to decide whether or not they wanted to be independent. He arrived at the polling station in the Sant Just Desvern suburb of Barcelona in the afternoon, hours after his team's training session ahead of El Clasico against arch-rivals Real Madrid. Piqué, who also plays for Spain, has previously said that if his political views posed a problem for the national team, he would retire from international football.
Well, I think elections are special. To be able to vote historically has not always been possible in this country, and now it is, and we have to defend that. When people are able to vote, everyone should express their opinions, and tonight we will see the will of Catalonia. And we will hope that it will be respected, no matter the results. But the outcome of what Catalonia wants has to be respected.
And there we go, a rare moment where sports lead us straight back to our top story of the day. We'll be back in just a minute with more on Yes, Catalonia's vote. We'll have our Madrid correspondent live, as well as an anti-independence candidate. Do stay with us.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young.
A programme about women who are reshaping our world. We meet those who seek equality, be it in the boardroom or at the village well. The 51% brings you stories from across the globe about the women who are challenged.